It is the country of Peter the Great, land of the Tsars, home of Pushkin and Tolstoy, Lenin and Stalin. Revolution, communism, perestroika, Russia. It is an old place, and century after century, day after day, it becomes a new one. Here, change is as constant as a river, and one river is the symbol of Russia herself, the Volga.
The Volga flows through the heart of every Russian. It feeds us, inspires us, and it sustains us.
In Russia today, what we are calling democracy is just a word, but not yet a way of living.
The Volga is my motherland. It gave us everything.
The National Geographic Society first came here in 1976 to make a film about the Volga River. But back then, the river that lives in the heart of every Russian flowed through a different country. Today, the Soviet Union is no more. We've come back to travel the Volga through a new country, still in the making. This film is about change on an eternal river. They call her Mother Volga, and in truth she nurtured an empire on these shores almost 5 centuries ago. Some say Russia's future is still tied to this great river. "100 miles north of Moscow, the countryside satisfies every picture book image of Russia. Here, the banks of the Volga seem timeless, as if nothing has changed for centuries. But much has changed, even here. The Volga once again flows through a nation called Russia. We'll travel to the cities and villages of the Russian heartland. More than 2,000 miles down Europe's longest river to its final destination, the Caspian Sea. The first stop on our journey was called Gorky for 60 years. Now, once again, it is Nizhny Novgorod. In the heart of the Soviet military-industrial complex, Nizhny was a major producer of weapons for the former superpower. Cloaked in secrecy, it was the most famous of the Soviet Union's closed cities. Today, the city is again open to foreigners. Since the Middle Ages, Nizhny was known as a great fairground and marketplace. Under communism, the annual fair was shut down. Now it is being revived as an international trade show. This statue of Lenin presides over a new open marketplace. And what do they sell here? Like any local market, they sell what they have a lot of. And what Nizhny has is weapons. Once both the symbol and the means of Soviet might, these weapons are now for sale to the highest bidder. Irina Preobrazhenskaya is a reporter for a local television station. She's covering the fair for tonight's broadcast.
Our fair dates back to a time years and years ago. Many different things were always on sale here, but never weaponry. And suddenly, the government of Nizhny Novgorod adopts the resolution to sell heavy weaponry legally. Tanks, armored carriers, for the first time in Russia.
It was developed right here in Nizhny Novgorod, and it was used during the war in Afghanistan.
We are opening for the world now. Although we are showing weapons, we do this with all our hearts and souls.
It's obvious who will be buying weaponry here. It will be Armenia, Azerbaijan, Moldavia, Georgia, beyond any doubt. So by selling weapons here, we keep the wars going there. We support the killing, naturally.
Even to those who report the news, the turn of events in Russia can be baffling. No one could have imagined how fast the Soviet Union would collapse, or how difficult such an abrupt change would be. George Malakan is a television journalist who recently lost his job. After 25 years of reporting about his homeland, he understands how freedom can be both a blessing and a burden.
We frequently hear and even say that until just recently, the Soviet man, the Russian man, was a slave of the system. This is bad, of course, just terrible. But now he has been emancipated. Yet if a man has not forced the slave out of himself, then he will still feel tortured. He's free, but he doesn't know what to do with himself. This is because being a slave of the system cuts both ways. On the one hand, the system oppressed him, but on the other hand, it took care of him. It fed him. It is a major problem that a slave, when given his freedom, quite often becomes helpless.
If Russians feel helpless, they have good reason. In theory, Russia decided to switch to a market economy virtually overnight. But in reality, people's attitudes do not change so quickly.
Russians as a whole perhaps do hate the rich, even if the wealth is earned through labor. And this presents a huge problem. It is envy. envy because I am poor and I have nothing, and the guy next door has a beautiful house, a fine car, a dacha.
Я завидую ему, а зависть рождает ненависть.
I envy him, and envy generates hatred. Today I see people ready to take up axes and pitchforks to skewer the rich without even thinking about how this wealth was obtained.
Может, оно осталось трудом или умом.
But it's hard to imagine an uprising against the rich these days, especially while so many Russians are developing a taste for the West.
The first American restaurant, they were not used to any American food, and it was something new.
Victor and Mary Coury are Arab Americans from Texas. Lured to Russia by the promise of new business opportunities, they decided Nizhny was the place to open the first fast food restaurant on the Volga.
They've never seen it before. They were skeptical about it. What is it? And when they tasted, especially, they loved chocolate.
American joy, American boy for always time.
They serve up generous portions of fried chicken and capitalism.
I wanted to do something. They touch my heart with their past, with their hospitality, with their attitude. They need the help of the West, period.
It's still too soon to tell if the Couries will make a go of Nizhny's answer to Roy Rogers. Russians clearly have a taste for fast food, but the question is whether enough of them will buy a meal that costs about half the average weekly salary here.
My people say either I'm crazy or I'm a hero, but I'm in the middle between two.
American, American, American boy.
If Russia's conversion to capitalism has got Lenin turning in his grave, thank goodness he doesn't know what else they're being converted to. Now that the opiate of the masses is freely available here, there's a new twist. Open competition for Russian souls. For the first time, it's possible for a foreign evangelist to seek converts legally in the former Soviet Union. This group of missionaries is touring the Volga on a kind of cruise ship tent show, bringing imported Protestantism to the Russian heartland.
I became a Christian 5 years ago, and I was hiding Bibles under my bed. Now I can travel on this boat and speak out about the truth which I believe, and that's really amazing. That's a miracle, and we cannot get used to miracles like that.
More than 200 Russians have joined the floating mission, led by Finnish evangelist Kalevi Lehtinen. Still, many Orthodox Russians along the Volga distrust and resent the outsiders, staging sporadic protests of the cruise ship evangelists.
Разрешите вам скажу, я вот молодая, да? Ну вот то, что вы сейчас говорите, вот эти споры, вот мы там убирайтесь вон. Ведь между людьми всего мира должна царить любовь, и именно любовь спасет мир. А вы согласие. А вы убирайтесь вон, зачем так?
But for the moment at least, the Russian Orthodox Church still has a corner on the faith market in this country. Despite a relentless Soviet campaign against religion, the church never ceased operating during the communist era. His Eminence Nikolai is the Orthodox Metropolitan in the Nizhny Novgorod region.
The Russian Orthodox Church has always been the salvation of our people, and we have millions of believers.
Мы только не ведем, кого спасать-то?
Today, the most regrettable thing is that Orthodox Russians are being converted into evangelical Christians.
Православных переводят в христиан. Ну, извините.
Having outlasted official atheism, the Orthodox Church is now experiencing something of a resurrection. And so far, these foreign evangelists are attracting only a modest number of converts. After all, how much do people worry about how to feed their souls when they are struggling to feed their stomachs? How do people survive the cruel uncertainty of hard times?
You know, in Russia, life is often a matter of faith rather than certainty or cold calculation. This is a Russian paradox, too. We don't know if life will return to normal, but everyone wants to believe it will. You probably know the expression, hope springs eternal. Hope is probably the very last thing to die in a person, and in a society too. And so everyone hopes. But will life become normal? No one knows.
Leaving Nizhny Novgorod, we continue down the Volga, joining the procession of ships that navigate the river day and night. The Volga has always been Russia's lifeline, carrying not only goods, but travelers. You haven't seen Russia, the saying goes, until you've seen the Volga. But seeing Russia this way is a luxury few Russians can afford these days. The Volga's once magnificent fleet of cruise ships has dwindled to just a few, and many of those travel half empty. When National Geographic came here in 1976, cruises on the Volga were still in their heyday. The Soviets introduced us to their most honored navigator, Captain Kirillov, commander of the flagship Lenin.
Captain of the Lenin since 1965, Vladimir Kirillov feels a special relationship with the Volga. He says, "I was born, raised, and educated on the river. I met and married my wife on the river, and I became a communist on the river."
When we caught up with Captain Kirillov, a lot had changed in his life. In 1984, his ship was destroyed in a fire.
I remember everything as if it happened today. Everything I had in my cabin burned. Everything except the film, Volga.
Прекрасный фильм. Прекрасный фильм. Единственный экземпляр у нас в стране.
A wonderful film. The only copy in our country. You know, everything on the ship burned except the film. Here are the film cans. See? They're charred, but they survived.
Они обуглились все. Они обуглились все вот так.
The captain saved his film, but the nation it portrayed is gone. Kirillov was a hero in a world that no longer exists. But what is the reward for someone who has devoted his life to the glory of the former Soviet Union? For Captain Kirillov, it amounts to being put out to pasture. After 52 years on the Volga, he's being sent to serve as a prop on a ship that never leaves the dock. A floating hotel that caters to foreign businessmen. Kirillov's days on Mother Volga are over.
My heart aches for Mother Volga. So many ships sailed along her just recently, and now only a few ships do. We live in such difficult times now. But I am optimistic that soon everything will be fine. I have no doubts about this. I am a captain of a ship that is meant to cruise down the Volga.
"200 miles downriver from Nizhny Novgorod, we approach the ancient city of Kazan. It's happening in cities all over Russia, but it began here. They call it the Kazan phenomenon. Street gangs, roving bands of youths, teenage violence. Ask the police here about the new freedoms, and they'll tell you about the new lawlessness. There's a word you'll hear all the time in Kazan. The word mafia.
Okay, men. Tonight we're going to inspect some places where the gangs and certain elements usually hang out. The captain ordered us to check out some of the popular restaurants and bars. First, we'll check out the situation and see if any criminals are there. Then we'll take measures to arrest them. Do not allow any provocations. Do not break the law yourselves. Now it's 7:30, so you'll be there about 8. That's it. At 8 o'clock, we'll begin the operation.
In Russia, mafia can mean the local street toughs or the larger network of racketeers. And the two groups are well acquainted. As in the West, the mafia here is involved in a variety of corrupt activities, including extortion, larceny, prostitution, and drug trafficking. Despite the changes here, there's still no such thing as probable cause. If the police want to set up a roadblock and look inside your car for any reason, you must let them.
We find more and more weapons, approximately 30 to 40% more than last year. If we didn't confiscate these weapons, our republic would literally be saturated with them. And when criminals have weapons, they shoot them. And who suffers? Innocent people.
Searches routinely yield handguns, rifles, and grenades, all manufactured for the military. And weapons aren't all they find.
Mia, what does it mean?
He doesn't have a job, but he's got 100,000 rubles in his suitcase. He can't explain where he got so much money.
No one knows why youth gangs first thrived in Kazan. They became a problem in the 70s, and authorities launched a crackdown. These efforts were successful to a degree, but when the Soviet Union collapsed, the government lost its iron grip, and gangs suddenly flourished. Russia opened the door for capitalism, and the mob came along for the ride. Police Captain Nail Akhundzyanov has been battling the Kazan gangs for years. He lives in a two-room flat with his wife Nuria, his mother, and his son Timur. Nail's family has lived in Kazan for generations.
I am a department chief for the Criminal Investigations Administration. That means I head up a group of police officers assigned to solving crimes committed by teenagers. It was roughly 8 years ago that this phenomenon of teenage gangs got started in our city. Today we have 63 gangs in Kazan, about 3,000 members. We used to have 5 or 6 rumbles a year, huge street fights. Imagine 200 guys on one side and just as many on the other. A real bloodbath. Kids were getting killed.
The situation here has become very dangerous. And there's a lot of killing. Of course I'm afraid for my husband. Every morning I tell him, as we say in Tatar, Allah bersa, everything will be fine.
Allah bersa, все будет хорошо.
Like Nail and Nuria, nearly half the population of Kazan is Tatar. A Turkic people, they speak the Tatar language and practice Islam. In the years since perestroika, ethnic traditions have experienced a revival, while some brand new traditions have also taken root. Like other Russian cities, Kazan has seen the birth of makeshift marketplaces all over town. Now, anyone can sell surplus tomatoes from the garden by just setting up a table. For the successful, the next step might be permanent kiosks selling packaged goods like Marlboros and vodka. But these small businesses struggle to survive against the tide of organized crime.
They have a lot of problems. One of them is that their kiosks can be burnt down.
I'm not afraid. The police guard me, and nobody demanded money from me. Why should I be afraid? They burnt me once. I don't know who or why, but now we've installed this iron kiosk, so it won't happen again.
Out of fear of reprisals, kiosk owners refused to admit any knowledge of extortion or arson. But the streets tell another story.
This was a private kiosk. They sold drinks, coffee, and other stuff, but they refused to pay the racketeers for protection. Every small business has to face these problems. If you don't pay off the mob, they'll threaten you, they'll burn down your kiosk, they'll even burn you out of your apartment. As far as I know, it was almost the same in America. Our mafia structure now is almost mimicking your famous Cosa Nostra or the Sicilian mafia. It's the same thing. There were 2 murders today and several assaults. The crime situation is bad enough, but every single murder is a tragedy. We are very worried about the increasing number of murders. What accounts for the increase? The only explanation is the total chaos, the instability today. And I think also that the internal brakes which everyone has are wearing down. People no longer respect each other, and this affects the murder rate.
If the routine avalanche of crime isn't enough to discourage Nail, this afternoon has a special chore lined up for him. A gang leader was murdered by a rival gang. Ironically, the overburdened Kazan police force will spend today protecting a mafia funeral. The police are tense, fearing an outbreak of violence. News crews are banned from the street. Our cameraman has to hide inside a police van.
The gangs are very aggressive. They're easily offended. I can't say that all funerals turn violent. Most of them are quiet. But there have been incidents. One guy might bump shoulders with somebody accidentally, and a fight breaks out. That's why we, the police, are here.
A few hours later, the funeral concludes without incident. But this kind of spectacle is not without impact on the city. The mafia has Kazan in a stranglehold, and everybody knows it. To the young, it sends a troubling message. The only people they see getting ahead are the gang leaders. At the train station, teenagers scrounge and hustle whatever they can to survive, whether it's legal or not.
Why should we be worse off than other people? We want to wear good clothes and eat good food too. For us, it's impossible. So we have to make money at the railway station. Right now, I think this is the only way for us to earn money. I can't see any honest way.
Natalia belongs to a street gang. She's 19, married, and has a 2-year-old. She's been in trouble a couple of times for minor crimes, including prostitution.
We live the way we always have. We take what we need from life. We don't pay any attention to perestroika. We're not interested in politics.
Я думаю, в какой-то мере потеряла.
I think society has lost control to a certain extent.
Сейчас, если раньше у нас, как бы сказать вам,
Before, young people were still controlled by things like young pioneer camps where they had to walk in formation and wear a uniform. In school, there was solid discipline as well. And the Komsomol, the Communist Youth League, also somehow controlled them. There's nothing like that left now. In principle, a young man, is on his own now. I think the future of all these kids who are in the gangs right now is inextricably linked to our own future.
Насколько будут быстро и
If the social climate in our city and republic improves, so will the lives of the children.
Улучшаться социальный климат вот нашего.
If the social fabric of the city seems to be unraveling, it remains intact just an hour away. Nuria's family has lived and farmed in the Tatar village of Saya for centuries. It is here that Nail and Nuria hope their son will find the values he needs to live a good life.
В принципе, наш народ,
In essence, our nation was formed in the village, not in the city. So the cultural traditions are kept in villages. I don't think there have been major changes in the village. How should I put it? Day-to-day life here is what it has always been. In spring, we plant potatoes. Come fall, we dig them. After all, the significant political changes take place in the cities. Everyday life in the village is always the same. People have lived this way for centuries.
Nuria's aunt Tanzilia sings an old folk song in the language of her ancestors, Tatar. Timur grew up in the city speaking only Russian, but now, for the first time, he's learning Tatar in school.
На флейте, как можно многому научиться.
Дети у нас немножко уходят от.
Soon he will share even more with his family and the people of his mother's village.
Но мы хотим, чтобы он сохранил.
We want our son to preserve the roots of his people. We want him to know his own people, his native tongue, the Tatar traditions, right from wrong. We want him to get his roots from the very wellspring of our people, right in the village.
По крайней мере, я постараюсь, я как его отец.
I will do my best as a father to give my son a foundation that will allow him to lead a good life. I am certain he will have a better life than me. Without this certainty, I couldn't go on living.
The Volga winds through Russia's heartland like it flows through her past. History has always traveled this river, and probably always will. From the 13th century on, the lush Volga basin drew wave after wave of invaders. War and expansion founded an empire in Mother Volga's lap. And the father of Soviet Russia, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, was born right on her shores. Once, this was an untamed river, surging powerfully towards the Caspian Sea. But today, the mighty Volga looks more like a huge lake than a river. The reason is a series of gigantic dams. In the 1930s, the Soviet government began harnessing Europe's longest and most powerful waterway. 7 enormous hydroelectric plants were constructed to provide power for countless new factories. For 3 decades, the Soviet Union devoted its resources to an ambitious plan to transform a country of peasant farmers into an industrial superpower. Communism is Soviet power plus electrification of the whole country, cried Lenin. And the Soviet leaders who followed put the plan into action. By the early 1960s, virtually every hamlet on the map could turn on the lights. But at what cost? Only the desolate ruins are left. Mournful relics of thousands of towns and villages sacrificed to a hungry river. The city of Stavropol was more than 200 years old when construction began on the Kuibyshev Reservoir. Then one day the dam was completed, and Stavropol was drowned. The living were relocated, but when the waters came, it is said the dead in their coffins floated to the surface in an eerie protest. The watery Stavropol was replaced by the brand new city of Tольятти. Tольятti was a communist showcase city. The Volga's hydropower spawned new industries, and factories drew a new population of bright young workers. But there was a darker side to industrialization. Only now are Russians learning about devastating environmental damage done in the name of progress. For decades, Tolyatti's smokestacks have poisoned the Russian sky. But this was not the city the Soviet government showed off to the world. When National Geographic was invited to Tольятти in 1976, what we saw was a technological success story.
The city's reason for being is the Volga Automobile Works, one of the largest auto factories in the world. The cost, nearly $3 billion. Prime contractor for the plant was Fiat of Italy, and the city is named Tольятти in honor of the late Italian communist leader.
Now, almost 20 years later, things have changed at the Volga Auto Works. Suddenly, the future is not so bright for Togliatti's 630,000 inhabitants, half of whom work for the car maker. The factory, nicknamed Vaz, is still one of Russia's leading exporters. But to survive in the world market, it desperately needs Western investors. So far, factory executives have failed to entice a foreign partner. But they have begun doing business with America's Motor City. Leo Kalageorgi is the General Motors representative in Tольятти.
My work here primarily is providing engineering and administrative liaison between Vaz and GM. It is of a major benefit to both sides that I do speak Russian. I do know the language because of my heritage. My grandparents came from Russia. I get a little tired of people giving the Russians an air of mystery which really is not there. And I think it's a product from the old days. I think somebody said, I think it was Winston Churchill, that, you know, Russia is an enigma, and it's a puzzle, and it's a mystery. And it's not true.
But Russia's economy is still an enigma, and Western industry remains skeptical about investing here. Bistrova has worked for the auto factory for 17 years. What keeps her here is the pay. Wages are still about twice the national average. A spot on the production line is considered a very good job, though working conditions are less than ideal.
The paint is unhealthy. It's synthetic, and it can be really harmful. We have chronic diseases in this part of the plant. Liver and kidney disorders, lung diseases, and there are some fertility problems for women. And it's also harmful for men here. It's bad for them. Bad for their potency. Women do the hardest jobs here, not the men. We just don't know what it means to be without work. We've never been without it. So far, there are no unemployed.
Still, in these uncertain days, rumors of impending layoffs are heard frequently on the assembly lines. For now, there is merely a hiring freeze. But in Russia, guaranteed employment is a thing of the past. When we visited Tольятти in 1976, Ludmila felt her future was secure. She had a good job and she was planning her wedding.
Local officials pointed out a couple planning to get married at the end of the week. 24-year-old Sasha Bistrov has been working in the plant 4 years. 18-year-old Yuda Ugitsky is a trainee just out of high school.
I was a young, frightened girl, really a child. I was just 17. I hadn't turned 18 yet. That we kept a secret, by the way, the fact that I wasn't 18 yet. So we kissed for the first time on May 9th, and the wedding was already on May 29th, you see, just a few weeks later. I think what happened was that Sasha wanted to be filmed, and therefore he proposed to me. That's my opinion.
But this marriage, made on film, lasted only 8 years. In 1984, Sasha and Ludmila were divorced.
When I think back about that film and about getting married, I feel like my life has not been terribly successful, since on weekends and holidays you see husband, wife, and children walking together, picnicking somewhere, and here I am on my own with my children. Do you understand alone? There's no one by my side, no man to pull together with me for this family. Any way you look at it, it's tough to be on your own.
Today, Ludmila lives with her 2 teenaged sons. They rent out one room of their modest apartment to help make ends meet.
In general, I think, these days the only thing I'm working for is to have something to eat and to put some clothes on the kids' backs so that they look halfway decent, especially since they have no father. Do you understand? And still, sometimes they're not well dressed, and sometimes they don't eat their fill. Every mother wants something special for her kids, especially a single mother. Take jeans or sneakers, for example. All the kids wear them now, and mine want them, so I buy them. But as a result, I shortchange myself somewhere. I do what I can, but it's hard with 2 kids. I understand that what is going on in our country now won't be over with today, tomorrow, or even 10 years from now. There has to be some sort of stability, something concrete to hold on to. And that will take many, many years, you see.
Ludmila's country is no stranger to adversity. The Volga carries the memories of a land that has seen troubled times before. More than once, this nation's survival has hung in the balance. 400 miles downriver from Tolятти, we approach Volgograd. But once it went by another name. It used to be called Stalingrad. "300 feet above the Volga River she stands. She seems to be screaming to her nation. Remember what we fought for. Remember who we are." She is called Motherland. colossal statue is a memorial to some 600,000 Soviets who gave their lives here on the banks of the Volga. They died in what is now regarded as the most decisive battle of World War II, the Battle of Stalingrad. No country paid a higher price for victory in World War II than the Soviet Union, and no city paid more dearly than Stalingrad. For 200 days and nights, soldiers and civilians alike fought the relentless onslaught of the Nazis. Endless artillery barrages left only 15% of the city's buildings standing. The Nazis were confident that victory would soon be theirs, and once they claimed Stalingrad, the rest of the country lay at their feet. But the Soviet people refused to surrender. By the end, nearly every single man and woman was recruited into battle. Fighting spread from house to house, down street after tiny street. Finally, on February 2nd, 1943, the Soviets raised the red flag above their ravaged city. The fascists had been driven out. Stalingrad was saved, but more than half our population lay dead. The fallen became legends. The survivors, heroes.
Dear comrades, I think we should honor the memory of our fighting friends, our comrades in arms on the occasion of this 50th anniversary of the Stalingrad victory.
I was 16, so it's not too tender for me to recall all this, looking at my granddaughter, now almost 16, the age I was when I went to the front. Of course, this feeling moves me to tears, not painful tears, but reminders of past burdens, the memories of combat, of friends and comrades, of my youth.
May the earth softly envelop our fallen comrades. Their memory and their heroism will never be forgotten.
These veterans of Stalingrad are the final link to the glorious Soviet past. Once treated as privileged citizens, today they feel lost and ignored.
The people who entertain the notion that everything in the past was a lie are insane. They are people who have not been through anything. who've never done anything for the sake of their homeland. To them, even our motherland today is no motherland, but rather something they are ready to sell out to just anyone. But it is very dear to us, the soldiers of Stalingrad, and the people who lived through that time.
What will become of the generation who fought and sacrificed for the former Soviet Union? The country they called Motherland. As we head south from the center of Volgograd, the city gives way to sandy riverside beaches and light-hearted vacationers. It's summertime on the Volga, and Russians escape the heat as they always have, splashing in their beloved river. But today, when you swim in the Volga, you swim in a sewer of lethal waste. Toxic chemicals, heavy metals, and pesticides poison this water. Uncontrolled industrial pollution is one of the darkest legacies of the Soviet era, and Russians have just begun fighting to stop it. Just 200 miles downriver, outside the city of Astrakhan, Russian environmentalists are facing down one of their biggest enemies. The Astrahán gas complex, one of the largest sulfur recovery plants in the country. Just 25 miles outside the city, it is among the worst polluters in all of Russia. Emissions from these stacks are thought to be responsible for serious health problems almost 100 miles away. For those who live right in its shadow, it's an ongoing nightmare. For years, no one could speak openly of the dangers here. Now that is changing. One outspoken critic of the gas plant is Nina Toropitsina, a reporter for the local newspaper, aptly named The Volga. The Volga has been published daily for 70 years. Until 1991, it was owned by the state and controlled by the Communist Party. In those days, there were no stories about pollution or its deadly consequences. Today, thanks to the courageous work of reporters like Nina, the newly independent paper is a key source of information about the Lower Volga region. Astrakhan is the southernmost city on the Volga before it empties into the Caspian Sea. Known as the crossroads of Europe and Asia, the 700-year-old trading center is home to more than 100 different ethnic groups, peoples who have learned to coexist. Nina has lived in Astrakhan for most of her life. After perestroika, she joined Russia's nascent environmental movement and began reporting on pollution in the region.
Journalism would not be worth a penny, as we say, if we did not hope that we could change something in this world, at least something. Even that little piece of truth we bring to the people changes the public consciousness.
For 2 years, Nina has been investigating the environmental impact of the Astrahán gas plant. Her beat is a sensitive one. The gas plant may be the region's worst polluter, but it's also its biggest employer. What's more, the gas plant partly finances the newspaper.
The gas complex could simply refuse to renew the contract which partially covers our expenses, and the newspaper would go bankrupt, to say nothing of my colleagues who would be thrown out into the street. So it becomes much more difficult to report on environmental problems.
The risks are great. But for Nina, the most important thing is to find a way to tell people the truth.
It's not that I'm just interested in ecology. It's not interest for the sake of interest. It's not even for the sake of journalism, though I like my work terribly. It's not for the sake of all this. It's for the sake of life. For those of us who live downstream on the Volga, the pollution is even more terrible than in other regions, because the water from all of Russia flows here. In the Volga Basin alone, there are 22 nuclear reactors. Just think about it. God forbid if something happens with them, half of Russia could be killed. Now they're telling us that the fish are sick. That's a very serious matter. We also eat that fish. So all this affects people. A human being cannot be isolated from nature. Yesterday, a scientist I interviewed told me that more than half of the newborn in Astrahán are born with abnormalities.
Now that scientists can speak openly, many blame the gas plant for widespread illnesses and birth defects. Deadly toxins are produced in the processing of sulfur, but Nina suspects an even more sinister cause. She remembers a day nearly a decade ago when she felt the ground tremble.
It was early in the morning. I was standing in the hall in front of the mirror. Suddenly, it seemed to me as if a wardrobe or something had fallen flat upstairs. A vase moved across the table. The books fell out of the bookshelf onto the floor. We were scared and took it for an earthquake. Later, we wondered why there was no official information about an earthquake in the region.
It was not an earthquake. It was a series of underground nuclear explosions detonated by the gas plant. These so-called peaceful bombs were intended to create huge underground cavities for the storage of natural gas. Nuclear technology similar to this has been used successfully elsewhere. But in Astrahán, something went wrong. Gas plant officials admit that all but 2 of the 15 underground cavities have collapsed. What's not clear are the consequences. As new information comes to light, Nina confronts the plant officials.
Vladimir Mikhailovich, what happened here that caused 13 out of these 15 cavities to collapse? What went wrong? Isn't it possible that radiation could get into the groundwater?
I'm going to tell you in the same order as I did before. In regards to the underground reservoirs, the radiologic situation is normal. The level is much lower than the background concentration, which is much lower than the maximum allowable concentration. Absolutely no reason to be alarmed.
It's a typical answer of a Soviet technocrat. They try to look as if nothing special happened. 15 nuclear explosions, and they say nothing serious happened. That's what's so amazing. The authorities were interested in only one thing, to act as if nothing had happened. All our Soviet propaganda was based on exactly that. When they looked at white, they called it black. If you remember, after Chernobyl, what were we told at first? Everything is okay, children.
But like Chernobyl, everything is not okay. And this is bad news for those living in the village of Seitovka. They live right in the shadow of the smokestacks. A 5-mile radius around the gas plant has now been declared an unsafe zone. Authorities claim the zone is unsafe because of the toxic chemicals emitted by the plant. Others, including Nina, believe the land around the plant may be contaminated by radiation from the underground explosions, though no official will admit to this. Whatever the cause, the people of Seitovka, who have lived here for centuries, face losing their homes, or worse.
Over the years, we've been noticing that the children's health got worse, that the children got sick more often, especially the number of respiratory diseases increased. Last year, we had to take 7 children to the hospital. We didn't know what was wrong with them, but that day there was a very strong smell of gas in the village. It turned out the children had gas poisoning. This happens all the time. We often smell gas here, and the children vomit, retch, and they complain about headaches. It's frequently this way.
Vrima Escanavra. God forbid, of course, but suppose all of a sudden a failure happens at the gas plant. Suppose there is, in fact, a gas alarm. Are you sure that all the children could be saved?
I'm absolutely not sure of that. We often have gas safety drills. We put on respirators, get them dressed. We're supposed to do it in 10 minutes and get out on the street. But there are so many children in this building and only 3 adults. There is no guarantee that we can save the children in that amount of time. They understand nothing. We tell them, kids, let's play cosmonauts. Certainly they don't know that we are drilling something. Why tell them? We don't tell them because they are children. You see, they're playing. They think it's a game.
But some children had no warning. No make-believe cosmonaut games. Their tragedies occurred before they were even born. Their mothers worked in one of the Soviet Union's top-secret military-industrial regions, where pollution controls and health standards were, at the very least, neglected. Some critics charge that people were deliberately sacrificed in order to speed military production.
We are helpless, just helpless. Look at the children here. Their mothers seem healthy, delivery was normal, everything was fine, but the child is ill. Why? What's the cause? It's the environment, what else? But what can we do? Nothing. There's no cure for these children.
This hospital orphanage in Azamas is like many across the former Soviet Union. Doctors here claim that over 60% of these children are suffering the horrifying effects of industrial pollution.
The children are in a terrible state. When I came to work here for the first time, I was terrified. I looked at the children. I'd never seen children like them. I was a young girl, just out of medical college when I started here. Some of the parents who bring their children here cry desperately, while others are glad to get rid of their child.
How old are you?
8.
Do you have a mother?
No.
Why not?
My mommy had me, and then she abandoned me.
Here the children are fed and kept clean. They are being cared for. Of course it's difficult. This job requires kindness and humanity and patience. They like to snuggle up. They call us mommy. Yes, they call us mommy.
Некоторые родители вообще не ездят.
According to Nina's research, no comprehensive studies have been done recently on radiation levels in the unsafe zone. The villagers of Seitovka are still waiting to hear if they will be evacuated. The Astrahán gas plant continues operating, and children continue playing under the smokestacks every single day.
I believe personally that no matter how life will be later, we should do our best to at least leave the planet with a clear conscience. One should do his best to make this life a good one.
There is no precise moment when a river ends and a sea begins. A delta exists in a limbo between the two. A subtle world of channels, swamps, and meadows. Where the waters of the Volga turn into the Caspian Sea, there are dozens of tiny fishing villages, accessible only by boat. The village called Tishkova has endured in this watery place for nearly 300 years. Isolated from the mainland, this close-knit community has weathered well the passing Soviet years. The reason is caviar, the black gold of the Delta. Over the years, caviar has made Tishkova prosperous, a pleasant, comfortable place to live. The small village even has a successful cannery that still brings income when the fish aren't running. Tishkova has been lucky even during the recent days of upheaval and change. While factories close across Russia, this village has found foreign buyers for its products. Although better off than many places on the Volga, Tishkova is not immune from all of Russia's troubles. Downstream from Astrakhan and the whole of industrial Russia, the Tishkova fishermen fear for their livelihood. Once abundant in every stream, sturgeon that provide caviar are becoming scarce in the filthy waters of the Volga.
The river is being polluted by the factories upstream. There are fewer fish because they can't survive here, so they stay in the Caspian Sea.
One thing everyone in Tishkova knows: without the Volga, there is no future here. But for the present at least, summer on the Delta is still a season of abundance. Over vodka and caviar, fish pie and pickled tomatoes, friends and family share another uniquely Russian gift. They talk. They tell the story of their hopes, their fears, and their river.
Dear friends, we've gathered at this table for the sake of a common cause. This is the Volga River, the river that nourishes all the Russian people who love it. I drink to our native Caspian Delta. I drink to our land.
Вперед! За наше низовье Каспийское. Давайте, девочки, за вашу родину, за вашу землю.
Не будет ничего на земле не жить без воды, без солнца. Жизнь, понимаете?
The Volga means life, you see. Where there's water, there's fish. Man has to live, to eat, or he'll starve and die.
I hope for the best, but whether it comes or not doesn't depend on me. I just hope. Man can't live without faith.
The Volga flows through the heart of every Russian. Not just every Russian, but every Soviet as well. To be more precise, I would say that it has flowed for many, many years through the hearts of the people who live along the Volga. Yes, the Volga has always been our most important river, our most beloved river. Yes, it is our most cherished river because it sustains us. Yet how has it happened that today the Volga is beginning to perish? Whose fault is it? I want to raise a toast that 50 or 100 years from now, our children and grandchildren will sit at this table and still be able to say, our Volga feeds us, inspires us, and supports us. And I think today we must do our best to revive our Volga, so that it will remain as great as it has been from time immemorial, so its fame will continue to spread for many, many years. I drink to the health and the future of the Volga.